Hello. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. To those of you who've not joined us before, thank you for coming along to the first of season 2 of Empire Engineering's Tech Sessions. For those of you who are coming back, thank you very much for showing faith in us. We'll endeavour to entertain you this morning. My name's Stu Pringle. I'm your host today. And I'm joined today by an absolute plethora of stars who will all meet shortly. And we're here to discuss one of the big topics right now, skills shortage in offshore wind. I'll introduce the speakers shortly. But before I do, just a little bit of housekeeping from me. Crowdcast system's pretty straightforward. As a watcher, you'll see down the right-hand side, we've got a little chat waterfall. Please get stuck in, say hello, tell us where you're from, tell us your views as we're all chatting away. We can all see that. You can also ask us a question at the bottom, which I can pick up as the host. And then during the session as well, we'll be running a bit of audience interaction and asking you to take part in a poll. When we get to that point, I will let you know that there's a poll and it'll pop up on your screen. But really all you need to do is sit back, relax and enjoy. If anyone's struggling with audio quality, Internet Explorer and Crowdcast sometimes don't get on very well. Chrome is best, but most other browsers are absolutely fine. I just want to say a very quick thank you to our sponsors, without whom this whole series wouldn't be possible. This year we're being supported by ITH Bolting and SIF, so thank you very much to both of them. But what I'd like to do now is move on to the topic for today, all about skills and how to get into offshore wind. It's probably about time we meet our speakers. So what I'd like to do now is just get each of them to say very briefly hello and who they are, and because we're very polite and well brought up people, we're going to go ladies first. So Claire, hello, welcome.
Hi everyone. My name is Claire Lohan. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Copenhagen Offshore Partners, so that's COP for short, and I'm based here in Taiwan. So my job is basically to manage the development of a pipeline of projects that we're working on to prepare for some upcoming auction rounds here in Taiwan. I didn't start in wind, I started in thermal power actually, way back in 2005 with E.ON. And later moved on to Ørsted and then COP. So I'm based in Taipei. I've been here for just over 3 years now.
An extra big thank you to Claire, because we are eating into a Friday evening, so thank you for joining.
That's okay, my pleasure.
Excellent, and we're also joined by Irina, who you can see on screen.
Hi everybody. My name is Irina Cortizo. I'm based in Scotland currently. I'm an industrial engineer by background, and I'm currently working for Scottish Power Renewables. Right now working as part of the engineering management team for the East Anglia Hub projects.
Brilliant, thank you, Irina. Excellent. And we've also got Dafydd, who's joining us today.
Morning, everyone. I'm Dav Roberts. I work for RWE Renewables. Currently a wind turbine technology engineer, mechanical engineer by background. I joined wind about 3 years ago from oil and gas. So made the move after about 15 years in oil and gas.
Excellent. Thank you, Dav. That's brilliant. And we have George with us today, who's also another first-time participant on these sessions.
Yeah, morning, everybody. My name is George Jamison from Karl Associates. We're specialist recruiters for renewable energy. Been doing offshore wind for over a decade. I'm so old, I can remember doing 2-blade onshore wind turbines when a megawatt sounded like total science fiction. So I've been around the block for a while.
Excellent, very good. And last but not least, we are joined by Karl Davis, who I think most of you already know.
Yeah, I'm Karl Davis, thanks Stu. I'm Managing Director of Empire Engineering. My background originally is mechanical engineering. Empire Engineering, we're foundation specialists working in offshore wind. We're helping developers basically design foundations and deploy foundation projects around the world.
Excellent, brilliant. So there we are, there's our panel for today. And as you've probably noticed, each of our speakers have had a career before they came into offshore wind, and that's where we particularly chose the panel today. And of course, George, to give a slightly different point of view that perhaps isn't often heard from the seat of the recruiter. So it should be a good debate. Let me set the scene. As we all know, offshore wind is going through a period of massive growth. There's a huge number of projects that are planned or in play over the next 10 years. And often, supply chain is cited as a potential point of failure. Everything's getting bigger. How can fabrication, transportation, installation all keep up? But what if there was a more fundamental problem before all of that? What if simply we didn't have enough people, enough skills? We're hearing in the press right now that everything from doctors to lorry drivers, there's a huge shortage, and that's impacting us in the UK today in quite a major way. But have we got enough skills in the offshore wind industry to get the job done? So let's find out. So my first question to the panel, and I'd like to go to Claire first, is from your perspective as someone who's hiring, what skills are you seeing in demand right now?
I think the truth is that actually there's a lot of skills in demand, like nearly across the whole development life projects in all sorts of disciplines. My job is focused on kind of early development. So I see a particular gap around permitting, anything kind of environmental staff, those types of skills. But the reality is in Taiwan at the moment, we've got a lot of construction ongoing as well. We've got a lot of development work moving into operations for the first wind farms. And the market is just incredibly hot. So that's both for good local staff, but also expats with some experience coming over. So I guess my message would be that if you have an environmental or technical qualification and maybe some experience in consenting, infrastructure projects, then now is a really good time to get into offshore wind. And on top of that, if you have a sort of a travel bug, a bit like me, then moving to Asia or other sort of regions outside Europe now is also a good time to give it a go.
Excellent. Really, really good opening points. Thank you, Claire. Irina, I might come to you next. What are you seeing from your seat?
So pretty much concur with everything that Claire mentioned there, but I'm currently more involved, I guess, in pre-construction projects. And over there, what we're seeing is a high demand of all sorts of engineering skills, really. So you name it, electrical, foundations, structural, geotechnics, all sorts, really. But the thought as well is that in the end, they are very large infrastructure projects. So it's not just about the specialists in that area, but also skills. You need planners, you need project engineers, you need interface managers, risk managers, you name it. So it's all about skills, attitude, the people that can bring that into a large infrastructure project, not just the specialists, but also the people that really can add into it.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. No, I very much agree. And I think when we come to George in a bit, he'll probably expand on that, I'm sure. Karl, you're currently hiring. How hard is it?
It's really hard. Getting good people into offshore wind has always been a challenge. I've been doing this for 10 years and recruitment has always been one of the real challenges for us. But now it's just getting worse and worse. And we're having to kind of pivot a bit in how we approach this. Historically, we would always bring in experienced people. We're a consultancy and our clients like working with experienced people. But we're finding we just can't get those experienced people anymore. So if we want to grow, we've got to start hiring less experienced individuals, people with slightly different backgrounds than we would normally, and plan to train them. It's quite a big shift for us as an organization, but I suspect that we won't be alone in that approach, that others will be saying, actually, we can't get people that have done this before. And the only way to be able to serve the needs that you've got is to bring in people from a slightly more diverse background with less experience and just plan to have a good training program for them so that they can upskill and then deliver what we need.
I think that last point is really key. As the employer, the investment you're going to have to put into these people is quite considerable. There's a responsibility there, isn't there?
Absolutely, and there always has been, and you should always be looking to train your staff and that kind of thing. But now it's quite different. Rather than taking people that are experienced and just adding to their capabilities, you're taking people that probably can't do what you really need them for, hiring them, and then there's a period of time where they will be, less useful essentially to you until you can get the skills into them, and that takes time and effort and cost and risk, because there was the risk of training people as they leave and these kind of things. But I think everyone's going to be having to do this now. Creates really interesting opportunities. So anyone that wants to get into offshore wind at the moment, those opportunities that I would say 2 or 3 years ago, it was very difficult to get in. Now the bar has been lowered, and people with more diverse backgrounds will be a lot more welcomed in and be given opportunities that they wouldn't have seen a few years ago.
There's a really good point. So that very last point there, that 2 years ago, now the situation's changed.
Absolutely.
In a relatively short period of time. Okay, so Karl, MD of small consultancy. Dafydd, you're in RWE, huge organisation. What are you sort of seeing from your seat?
Similar sort of story, really. We really struggle to fill some of the roles that we need. My particular experience in wind has been with operations engineering support so far. And every time we put a job out for recruitment, we really struggle to get the right sort of candidates that we need. To echo Karl's points, we won't get people who have all the knowledge and all the experience. And so what has worked well is getting people to come across from oil and gas, say, or from other relevant industries with the sort of core engineering skills that you need in terms of engineering judgment, work management, prioritization, all these basic things, but without the wind-specific knowledge, and then actually training those people up to gain that industry-specific. What I've been surprised about is how quickly people can actually get up to speed and be useful. If you've got all the basic professional skills that you need to do with generic engineering role, then getting that wind industry-specific stuff, if you're a capable individual, can happen quite quickly, I think, with the right training and right support. And that has worked well. A note of caution is that I see people wanting to come from, say, oil and gas and expecting to move straight across with similar sort of seniority and similar salary, and I really don't think that's realistic. But what can work really well is to take a step down in package and seniority while you gain that experience, and then you probably expect to jump back up quite quickly after that as well.
Because Dafydd, you were a turnaround for a while before you sort of made the move, so quite a conscious decision to come out of that world and come across.
Yeah, so my particular situation, I'd reached a fairly senior level in oil and gas, and I was on a big salary, and I was quite high in the management tiers, managing maintenance, reliability, and turnarounds, sort of CEO -2 level. But I couldn't see a future in it, and I made a big decision to jump into wind. But in doing so, I took sort of 5 steps back and literally halved my salary. But I'm still confident that I made the right decision, and well on the way back 3 years later to where I was. And with the current skills shortage in the industry, it does offer you that opportunity to progress quickly once you have that industry-specific knowledge.
Interesting. But I do know that Claire's probably about to make the point that you don't necessarily have to take a big jump down.
Yeah, my personal experience was I was able to do a kind of a parallel move, but I was probably in my late 20s, maybe very early 30s. So it was probably exactly the right time to do it. But yeah, I went from managing power station outages to offshore wind operations. So it definitely took a few years to get my head around it.
Sure.
But lots of transferable skills.
That's the key point, isn't there? I think everyone. So to the audience, we had a practice chat a few days ago, and I think that was one of the key kind of points that came through about transferable skills. Right, I'd like to bring George into the conversation because he's been very quiet so far, and if anyone's met George, that's very unlikely. So, George, one question for you. You've been doing this for donkeys. You know this market inside out and upside down. How have you seen the recruitment market change in the last 18 months?
I would say that the demand for offshore wind engineers has been consistently bigger than supply of them since it started really 10 years ago. That's only got bigger. The discrepancy between demand and supply has only got bigger. That's pushing up prices, as any economist should tell you. Now's a good time to ask for a pay rise for anybody out there that wants one. But I would say that we've seen across the board a big increase in demand. So previously there was like a mid-range level of engineers that were always in demand, highly sought after. Everybody's chasing the same people. Now it's across the board, and companies have realized, even big developers now, they're struggling to hire, actually looking for more junior, looking for entry grads, and being flexible in approach. People talk about looking outside of degree qualified engineers quite a lot. Still a bit of stickiness on the actually hiring them. For some reasons, that's understandable. There's a couple of other big issues that have happened in the last few years. Brexit cut the knees off the European market for people coming to the UK. Back to all our European friends, I would say that the UK will need you. We like you. Come. We're open for business, as the Prime Minister might say. Visas are still obtainable. It's still, we still got a demand for people, and we welcome them and we want them to come over. Post-COVID is another kind of clash of realities taking effect, as you can see in the news every day with the petrol. The HGV lorries is just a great example now that, there seems to be a supply chain issue. Changing that is not going to be a quick fix. The quick way to get it is just to import people to do the job realistically. Talking about supply chain and fixing supply side issues is more structural. It takes time, realistically. So there's quite a few things going on at the moment that are challenging, shall we say.
Yeah. And you do a little bit in the States, well, more than a little bit in the States as well, George. How do you see that market?
That's interesting. So at the minute, offshore wind's all focused on Boston area. I'm led to believe that's not kind of sustainable because they're under the same sort of pressures. Cost of living is very high there. Oil and gas infrastructure is predominantly Houston, Texas, and there's very likely to be a pivot away from Boston, or as well as Boston, into an oil and gas infrastructure like Houston, where the cost of living is a lot less, taxes are less, people are more available. I think we've probably seen that or are starting to see that now in Aberdeen in the UK as well, where they're kind of pivoting out of oil and gas, making use of their infrastructure, the people, their expertise. It is interesting, and having worked from home, and I'm at home the same as everyone else for the last 18 months. Some people are saying that location isn't important. I mean, there's always lots of pretty pictures about how we can use technology to not go back to the office, but actually we're finding location's even more important all of a sudden. So the days of long commutes every day are gone. Those days have passed. People will go to the office a couple of days a week, but they don't do a long commute from that. So location, funny, people saying location is not important because of what we've seen after the last 18 months. I'm saying the opposite. Location is actually more important. Looking for people that are local is actually really helpful as well.
Interesting. George, there's been a question in saying that, if someone hasn't got the classic skill set or they've come from elsewhere, is there a danger that if they're applying to the bigger organizations that it's a bit square peg, square hole, and they might not sort of get heard properly? Do you find it's harder putting slightly unusual people into the bigger organizations?
Well, yes, I could see that Jonathan has raised a point about some guys like us get pushed back when we're trying to push people in with transferable skills. But a good engineer is a good engineer. The big question will be whether companies will look outside of degrees. That's the kind of question mark at the minute. And there are other ways around it, like doing a degree part-time or doing a compressed degree, 2 years as a degree, or apprenticeships is a big thing. But I would like to see more clients put their money where their mouth is, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is not always possible for every one of the engineer positions. But I would say a big shout out to all the STEM ambassadors. Any of you that have done STEM in the last 10 years, definitely I'd see a lot more people coming from different backgrounds, a lot more females in engineering. So I think the STEM stuff is a good example of that. But again, that's not a short-term instant fix. That's structural, systematic 10-year program type stuff. But yeah, big shout out for that sort of stuff.
Irina, anything from you? I can see you've just unmuted yourself, so I feel you're ready to speak. So you wanted to say?
No, I was just going to add to what George was saying there. That it's true that it takes a little while. It takes a little bit of attitude and a bit of will to make that jump over. And it's not just about the skills; it's about the energy, the will to adapt, the will to learn, the will to get out of the box, right? and how to make that come across in the hiring process maybe is what is a challenge. It's not just about good engineer, not just about the projects that you've done, not just about the degree, but also your attitude towards it and your will to make the change, your will to adapt to a totally different industry that perhaps moves at a different pace, perhaps has different challenges. How to come across like that and how to demonstrate that for the people that want to make the move is maybe a bit of a challenge that they need to solve.
Good points.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Jonathan's point there about oil and gas guys coming across, it's a really good point, and we see lots of oil and gas guys even over the past 10 years or so coming into offshore wind, but it's not a straightforward transition. The skills absolutely applicable and transferable, but the specifics of the industry are quite different, and they do take a while to learn, and there are quite a lot of attitude differences between oil and gas and offshore wind. And I think people need to be a bit realistic about how long that can take to get a handle on. I've been doing this for a while and have seen plenty of oil and gas guys come into offshore wind and found it more difficult than they expected, and have moved away and that kind of thing, have been less successful. And I think it is important to be realistic that if you are going to make that transition, you've got to accept that it's not entirely straightforward, and you're going to have to put some work in. And as Irina rightly points out, a lot of it's about attitude, and the attitudes within renewables can be a bit different than oil and gas. The idea of essentially serial production of lots of structures versus one that's a particularly high value, they're quite different. And it's not to say that oil and gas experience isn't relevant; it's completely relevant, but it does take some time. And we typically see it's a couple of years for oil and gas guys to come in and get up to speed with how offshore wind works.
And it's invaluable, once it comes across, then it's really good. It's really good experience.
Completely.
You learn so much from those many years of oil and gas operations, but it is a different world. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And Daf, you will experience that
You've
as
done
well.
this.
Sure.
You've done the jump.
Yeah, I think what you work more, Karl, in sort of front-end design and consultancy, whereas my experience was in operational engineering support. And there, I think the transition is easier and maybe closer because the work is similar. We're doing similar tasks. To George's point about degrees, though, what we find is that we get sort of two types of application for these roles. We get technicians who want to progress, and whilst a lot of those guys are really good and might be excellent for the role, they generally lack some of the sort of professional skills that we need to make a start in a proper engineering role. They've been technicians for 10 years, they've got really, really solid technical knowledge, but they don't know how to, organise work, run a meeting, manage emails, just all those normal professional skills. Then you get the other side of the coin where you get sort of specialists who are maybe from a consultancy or a certification body or something like that. They know everything about the wind turbine, but maybe they don't know, how a hydraulic system works or the practicalities of actually setting someone to work or something really practical like that. And what we really struggle to find is somebody in between who's maybe got the practical experience or the engineering knowledge, but also has some of the professional skills to actually be effective in those roles. That's what we really struggle to find. And I think there's people who are out there that maybe just don't think that they could do those roles.
But both those things are perfectly doable for most people are capable of learning. Possibly I'm not putting myself up as a hydraulics engineer anytime soon, but or actually very good at emails either. But anyway, you engineers are perfectly capable of learning new stuff, surely.
Good. Right, I'm going to keep the conversation moving. I think it's time that we talk about something that's on everyone's mind. Let's get into homeworking. We've skirted around this a little bit already today. We've got one person in the office. I'm in a co-working space. We've got 2 in the office and 3 at home. So there you go. There's this split live happening here today. But I think we should ask the audience. So I've just set up a poll just now that everyone should be able to see, which asks you, how many days a week would you like to be in the office? So once we're a little bit further post-COVID and there is the options. So I've just put that up now, and here we go. There's some results coming in. So I've asked people, would they like to be in 0 days a week, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3, 4, or 5? And the results are coming in live right now. We've had about 30, 40 votes in. There's 80 odd people live, so please don't be shy. If you click polls down at the bottom bar, you should be able to see it. And at the moment, 2 days seems to be the preference, just over 40%. With 3 days, 27%, and 5 days only have 2 votes. So it looks like, in terms of the will of the people to have that flexibility is a desirable thing. Karl, as an employer, would you want people in 2 days a week? What's your view?
I like the idea of it. I think it's fantastic. Flexibility, that's great. People having more family time, these are all great things, and we should be encouraging them. But when we talk about skill shortages and hiring people with less experience and training them, having people only here for 2 days a week, that really presents a challenge. If you've got a relatively young person and you want them to gain skills from the rest of your team, you need that person in the room, and you need the rest of your team in the room so that they can learn from them. And 2 days a week, I would argue, is probably not going to cut it. And yeah, you can learn lots of stuff over Teams and these sorts of calls, but it's just not the same in my experience. And maybe I'm a bit of a dinosaur in that regard. And there's certainly companies that do it, and some companies don't even have offices and can do this. But I see that as a real challenge, and and that's something that we're going to really have to try and work on and work out 2 days a week, because that's what my staff are telling me as well. That's what they'd like to be doing. But how do you train people with that?
Absolutely. Claire, I think you've got some interesting thoughts here, particularly from the international perspective.
Yeah, I completely understand why people want the flexibility of working from home. I would like that for myself, maybe at times. But I think it's important to consider not just the job, but maybe the kind of culture that you're working in as well. So, for example, here in Taiwan, the culture is everybody comes to the office every day. The development work that we're involved with is very hands-on in terms of stakeholder engagement, meetings. You got to show your face, you got to build trust, you got to kind of get to know each other. And I think that doesn't really fit with coming to the office 2 days a week. And I feel here that it doesn't work. So if you need that kind of flexibility, then probably, number one, a construction project obviously isn't the right place, because there's a need to be at construction locations at certain times of the year anyway. And also maybe some of the early development work is going to be challenging as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting.
I just think maybe, if you had asked us a year or 2 years ago, if we had the possibility of all work from home and keep working and things keep running, we would have said, no, that's not going to happen. It's impossible. And here we are, right? So I think there might be something else, there might be different ways of learning that we haven't tried yet. And yes, it's not all together in the office, might be being more generous with our time, might be more self-learning, might be getting together for longer periods, but part of the year, I don't know what the answer is. But,
no, we were speaking the other day, ideas like everyone being in for, 2 weeks of the quarter, or 1 month in the quarter, or it's sort of that more sort of intense working together, and then being a little bit more diffused is quite interesting. I think we can also look at what some big tech are doing, and the answer isn't sure there. You've got some who are closing their offices, and you've got some who are spending millions on new ones. So I think that debate's still to happen, and I want to speak to both Daf and George on this. Daf, because I know that you're someone who's doing a role that probably pre-COVID you would have thought this can't be done from home.
Yeah, so pre-COVID, if you'd have asked me if we could do what we were doing 5 days a week at home, I would have said no chance. I thought it was a really hands-on role. I thought all the interactions with the local people were essential. I just didn't think it would work. And then COVID came along, and all of a sudden we're all stuck in our homes, miles away from each other. And guess what? The world didn't fall apart. It all carried on. Actually, our quality of life all improved, all of us, all the people in the team. I think personally I got a lot more work done because, I just got to focus on what I needed to do. Endless Teams calls is a challenge, and Zoom fatigue and stuff like that. But I think we're learning how to cope with that, and ways of working are changing to adapt to that. Yeah. And as Irina said, to Karl's point, yes, I agree that bringing people without skills in and trying to train them across teams is difficult, and I'm actually doing that right now with the new starter. But again, I think with a mix of some time in the office, some maybe different ways of working, as you said, like maybe we have 3 days in a month where everybody just gets together and works together. I think we'll find ways where you actually compromise. And what was interesting in the poll is nobody said 0 days and nobody said 5 days. And I think that what we will get to is a model where we spend some days in the office and some days at home, and it maybe won't be, we'll go in every Tuesday. Maybe we'll go in that week of the month.
I'm getting told off by Richard for deviating, so I think we'll move on. But very quickly, George, from the recruiter's perspective, you're seeing people opening line if it's in the office. Do you want to talk to you?
Yeah, so we're clients and candidates need to be flexible. That's we're all working from home. Necessity was the mother of invention. We were all told it couldn't be done, and suddenly it can be done. But going forward, I think both sides need to be flexible. Candidates have the whip hand at the minute, and they can set out the terms and conditions that they want. I find myself arguing with a guy during the week who said that he had to be home every day to pick the kids up, and I was arguing, trying to get some flexibility before I stopped myself realizing I've got to pick my own kids up every day now. And so I realized that we're all, like, the world has tilted and things have changed. All we're trying to encourage is both sides to be flexible. That's clients to be understanding that 5 days a week is gone. Candidates to understand that, do you want a career or just another job? It might be nice to display some or have some interest in saving the polar bears, for instance. Some flexibility is good. Mentoring juniors, Karl raised it. It's juniors coming through. We're talking about moving away from just hiring people like ourselves who have got 10 plus years experience, but looking outside of that, juniors, they will need mentored. It is nicer for them to be in an office picking around problems in a design, engineering, dev environment. It's nicer to be collaborating. As Irina says, the technology is out there, and I've seen lots of pretty graphics to show how we can all have holograms of each other in the office around a virtual campfire. I know it's doable. I just think that there has to be, it was very easy to send us all working from home. It's proven harder to get us back to the office. Flexibility and approach from both parties would be a good approach.
Very good. Okay, right. I'm going to bring this right to the heart of things now. Sort of last question I really want to pose to the panel. What would you say to people looking to get into offshore wind? So you've all explained a little bit about your background, how you've worked from coal to hydro to oil and gas, and then come across. So you at some point you have made that jump. So if you were talking to your younger self or to some of the graduates who are listening here today, some of the people who want to come across, what would be sort of your top tip that you would advise them? Because early in the discussion today, I've heard it said by more than one person, now is a great time. The barrier's lower, the demand is there. So if now's the time to jump, what's the top tip to help people do that? And Claire, I might come to you first.
Sure. Okay, I'll address my point maybe to the active job hunters in the group. I'm hiring all the time. I get many CVs on my desk every day. And in general, they're absolutely awful. So CVs, guys, sort it out. Absolutely no need for anything more than 2 pages. I mean, either side of an A4 page.
What does an awful CV have on it? What do we need to get rid of?
10 to 15 pages long. If it's not your very first job you're applying for, I don't care about your A-level results. I don't care about the waitressing job you had when you were, 14. You have to keep it relevant. There's so much advice online about how to do a proper CV. There is no excuse for a 10-page document. Keep it relevant, keep it simple. And actually that will stand out because there's so much awful CVs out there. So there's no excuse, and you should adapt it for the roles also that you're applying for as much as possible.
Get the spelling right, get the company
correctly.
right.
Yes,
If you're going to say attention to detail, try to spell it right.
Yeah.
Come on, George. I think we should go to you next.
If you're going to say attention to detail, try to make not too many typos in that sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. Dav, from your point of view, what would you, because you've done this relatively recently, what would you advise those wanting to do, or indeed, what did you find easier or harder than sort of during that transition?
Yeah, so I think my advice is that there's a lot of opportunity, as we've said, to make the jump. Now is a really, really good time, but you'll definitely find it easier to make the jump if you're willing to make some sort of compromise, sacrifice, or downstep. I was really open about it in my interview. I went in and I said, look, I don't know anything about the wind industry, but I'm really keen to work hard. I can learn quickly, and I'm taking a big step back. And that's why I'm taking a big step back. And, the recruiter at the time, my manager, was really keen on that approach, that open and honest approach that you recognise you don't have the skills. Mm. If you turn up to the interview and say, yeah, I can do it, I know all about offshore wind, I've Googled it, but that's not going to work either. Just be honest about what your skills are, what skills you have that are transferable, and how you're actually going to work hard to fix the gaps that you have got, and that'll probably work a lot better. And last of all, be realistic about what job you can actually take on with the skills that you've got.
Yeah,
be ready to step back, step down on your package with the knowledge that in this current market, once you do develop yourself and close those gaps, you definitely can jump back up quite quickly. Yeah.
And George, I know you've recently placed as a real life example, someone with not a typical background who just was determined, and they're now doing very well. Yes.
People come from different routes is a great way now for just looking at different options. More diversity in the market, labour market is good. Mature graduates are great as well. Dafydd mentioned technicians coming from a hands-on background that then end up doing some sort of degree or formal education qualification as a mature grad can end up being brilliant engineers. There's a lot of design engineers that I talk to might have done 10 years design engineering and not actually seen a wind turbine. So having the best of that, both worlds, is a great way. Just a kind of looking left field approach, looking at people from a non-standard sort of straightforward career trajectory is also nice. People coming from different industries, like we're talking about, absolutely. There are certain things that are always going to be transferable skills, soft skills, BD, commercial skills. Traditionally, engineers and sales were like oil and water, didn't mix. Now it's more normal that is a part of your job spec, the business development angle. So you don't have to come from offshore wind to have that. If you've got good commercial skills, that could be procurement, managing subcontractors, lots of different types of transferable skills. I would emphasize those at interview. And obviously, if you're a good design engineer, you're a good design engineer. And how hard can it be to learn a bolted joint?
Oh, George, that's another debate for another time. Let's swiftly move on from there. Irina, any final thoughts from you?
I'd say that for me, the spark of interest and the first contact with offshore wind was back in uni, actually. So I think back in the day, maybe there was not that many, but nowadays there's so many things you can do. So if you really have the interest, if you really want to come across, do something about it. There's courses, there's webinars, there's volunteering opportunities, there's days of, and if you come to an interview saying, well, I loved it, I did this, and I'm willing now to learn more and to come across, that bit of passion and that bit of self-will will take a long way. People will have to still train you, you'll still have to, put the hours in, but that will maybe differentiate you from others. So, if you're really serious about it, just do something and take that action, and it'll be great.
Actions speak louder than words, definitely. Very good. Okay, and Karl, last word from you before we start to wrap up.
Sure. I guess my message is that if people are looking to move careers, that we want you and we need you. Our industry really needs talented people. As an industry, we're I think at the moment we've got to be lowering the bar in terms of expectations of what experience people have and being open to considering alternate kind of career paths into offshore wind, and that just creates lots of opportunities. So yeah, any good organisation will have training programs for their staff now to get them up to speed with offshore wind. So my message is, yeah, if you're all interested, yeah, get involved, because you will be very welcome.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a really lovely place to sort of bring things to a close today. I'd like to say thank you to all of our speakers who've taken the time and I think spoken very candidly and openly and shared their experiences to date. So thank you to all of you. I'd like to thank SIF and ITH Bolton, our sponsors of this series. I'd also like to thank Karl and the Empire team for having faith in putting this platform on to put some proper debate into the industry, and hopefully we're a little bit different to the usual stale and stuffy conversations that sometimes go on. If I failed on that challenge, just send me a message and let me know. I'm sure you will. Which just really leaves me to say thank you also to you, audience, for taking part, all your comments, talking about the poll. It's brilliant. This is the second series of tech sessions. We are going to be back on Friday, the 5th of November, and we'll be sending information about that very shortly. And we're going to be talking about the really techy subject of fabrication limitations. And then my last point I'd like to make today is that I'm pleased to announce that Empire Engineering will be putting on the Foundation X conference in real life, face-to-face, person-to-person in Bristol in May next year. And there'll be a little bit more about that next time when we fully launch the event. But that's it for today. So I just want to say a final thanks to all our speakers. Thank you all. And we will see you again on the 5th of November. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.